And extend. So I should be able to see just my wallpaper, I think. Yep, and let's close Discord. Close. There we go. Slideshow.
Alright.
Center view, which means that this goes on the side. Then I can do F11. Works correctly.
Almost. How far away from the mic do I have to be for it to be audible? And now it's, yeah, there it is. Okay, back out. Okay, here we go.
So,
proper distance.
And nope.
Shout out to all the people who show up to all the panels early, like 5 or 10 minutes early, and see all the tech stuff going down. Y'all are the real heroes. Well, yeah, exactly. These are the featurettes, the bonus features.
That's like my favorite part of the.
Exactly. We should record a director's commentary of the panel that we did, and it's just us talking over us talking. It'd be great. I think people would get a lot out of us talking over us.
Yes, this is the part of the panel where we were setting up, and we had difficulty with the TV screen, but we managed to get it done really quickly.
Yep, exactly. Incidentally, one of my favorite any kind of like bonus feature commentary on a physical disc. Remember DVDs? The Aqua Teen Hunger Force movie. They had a commentary track where I think Phyllis Diller or someone was on it. They had nothing to do with this show. They just brought her in to watch this movie of an Adult Swim cartoon and commentate over it. There was no rhyme or reason to it, but I just love that they did that. And she's on there talking like, I don't know what any of this is or what's going on, but they thought that was funny, and I thought it was funny. So there you go. That'll be us. We have that to look forward to. People will ask us to be doing director's commentary on panels that we were never a part of.
Isn't that exactly what we're doing right now?
Yes, actually. Incidentally, we're going to be doing a commentary on films that we never worked on. Some of them I haven't seen in 10 years, but this will be fun, I think.
I think so.
We have a lot to say, and I think it's almost time. It's 1:59. Whenever you're ready to start.
I think so.
Awesome.
So should we introduce ourselves?
Sure. You go first because you are the horse of the hour.
I am the horse of the hour. Yes. I am Minty Root. I'm a fan animator, and I'm actually a CG generalist in the animation industry for movies and TV. I've worked on Scoob, Holiday Hunt, Aquaman, Maleficent, Mistress of Evil, Super Giant Robot Brothers, and a couple of projects I can't talk about yet. I'm pretty excited for, so...
Nice. I'm Thoth Penswell. I'm one half of Riff Ponies, one half of the TrotCon social media. Sorry if you get all those tweets. And because I have a film strip on my horse, and because I work in broadcasting, and I got a film degree, which is very useful, as you can imagine, all that thousands of dollars went to good use, that qualifies me to talk about My Little Pony movies at a convention. So that's what qualifies me to be here.
So we're going to start the presentation with a little disclaimer. This panel is not a review of the movies. We have people who already do the reviews of the movies. They do bring up lots of good points, but we don't want to talk about if we like the movie or not. We just want to talk about what made some things work and what went into the decisions of some of the things that happened. And I think it's more interesting to talk about the movies from those point of views because they bring up lots and lots of different viewpoints.
That said, I will talk about some of them from an analytical perspective because I love to talk about work, like you said, works and doesn't work in a movie. Basically, just do not expect a Roger Ebert quality review. I'm sure Roger Ebert gave all the Equestria Girls thumbs ups, so from the grave, because he was dead for most of them. But anyway, we won't talk about that. Let's talk about Equestria Girls.
Let's talk about cinema.
Oh,
So this panel is actually a sequel because anything has to be part of a multiverse or a cinematic universe.
I heard that guy really likes them. I heard Martin Scorsese really likes them.
Yep. And the panel we did back at HarmonyCon 2023 was Film Bronies. We covered those three movies. The 1986 movie, A Very Minty Christmas, the 2017 movie, and A New Generation.
Cinema.
And today we will cover the Equestria Girls quadrilogy.
Yay!
So let's talk about something very interesting. We said movies, and when you think about movies, you think about movies in theaters. Back in the pre-digital days when you had films done on actual film, some people would describe that a movie would have two lives. The first one when the movie came in theaters and when the movie came to tape later on home releases. And a lot of people described it as a different life because the process that they would have for to make those movies, they called it a telecine. It's effectively just a TV camera pointed at a film reel to basically just record an image of that film reel that could be put on a tape or for or later broadcast if it was a television re-release or if it was on tape or even if it had to be on Laserdisc. And back in the days, you'd end up with effectively, as it was a TV camera, the image quality would be downgraded. It would be basically seen on a small tube TV with a very grainy image. Sometimes you'd have black bars added, or it would be zoomed in because it wouldn't fit the shape of the image. It was quite a mess. So you would think nowadays that we have digital television, we have digital movie theaters. You would think now that the whole process would be streamlined. You wouldn't have to worry about any of that, right? Wrong!
Ooh, okay.
So to get a movie in theaters and to get a movie on TV is two completely different standards. Part of it is because they evolved on their own with their own standard. They call the whole process they have for movies, they call it DCP, a digital cinema package. And here's one of the decoder specifications you have. And I want to point out the first part where it says 2048 by 1080. And you will probably think this is 1080p. For television, it's 1920 by 1080, which means that you have a couple of pixels more on the image that you have to account for between those two. And for movies, what you have is that you have you will have two completely different ratios that are pretty close. So if you look, for example, at a movie that released on Blu-ray or on DVD, and you find those very tiny bars on top and the bottom, it's not a creative decision. It's just that the two mediums are pretty different in the way they capture pictures, and some movies would simply just crop the sides, and some directors just don't like it, even if it's a very tiny amount of change. So it really depends on the studio. So the question, the reason why I brought this up, Equestria Girls had a theatrical release, a very limited one, and we were wondering, so was it meant for theaters first and then had a television release a couple of months later? Was it always meant that way? Or was it also always meant as a TV movie that ended up with a theatrical release? And I think we found the actual answer by actually looking at that standard. So I found it's probably the worst kind of piracy, a cam rip at a terrible angle. If you just look at the top of the image on the cam rip, you can see that they cropped the tops. They basically cropped a bit the image to fit a TV worthwhile footage to fit on the DCP that they could release in theaters, which means that this was produced as a television production from the very beginning. Was it because their pipeline was always meant for TV and they didn't think of changing it for movie release, or was it because they changed their minds about releasing it in theaters later? We don't know, but we can already know that this looks like it was built for TV in the first place.
Fun fact, the one on the left was how Minty Root watched Equestria Girls.
That is true.
I was going to say, he's laughing because that's actually true. He did watch it on a cam rip.
That was not that can rip, but
Oh, it was another cam rip.
thankfully. So at BronyCon 2013, on my way there, I was thinking, well, I need to catch up with Equestria Girls. I couldn't see it in theaters because there was no theaters in my neighborhood who had the movie.
Was it only a not North American, was it only a US thing that it got a theatrical release?
I think I've heard there was some Canadian releases, but they were pretty rare. So in my case, I couldn't find it. So
Right.
I just found a camera somewhere that I just watched on my laptop on my way back from the con.
That's the proper Brony way to do it.
That is the most brony way to do it.
Exactly.
So let's talk about the very first of those movies, Equestria Girls.
Hey, nice. I was gonna say, I want to ask in relation to theaters. Show of hands, how many people watched Equestria Girls in theaters when it had a limited theatrical release? Okay, you 1, 2, 3, 4. Congrats, you all paid $20 to watch a TV movie in a theater. No, I did too, so it's okay. I guess I'll kick off the discussion here where when we set out to do this panel, this was the only movie that I had not seen since I sat down in theaters in 2013 and saw it. It was an interesting experience. I don't know, Minty, if you want to give your thoughts first, or if you want me to lead right into it.
I could try to just show a couple pictures to give you a good idea
Sure.
of some of my thoughts.
for
The framing of this scene,
Ooh.
it tells you a lot about Fluttershy. It's
Okay.
incredible. It's quite interesting as a movie, just the way, not just the way it was presented, because you transition from ponies, which are framed in different ways because of their shapes and just the way that they move. It's very different from going with humans. And you go with a medium that is very, like the storytelling is very visual. So you get some awkward things like this, where the idea is to basically explain to the audience that the image was simply just photoshopped, but by replacing the Photoshop by an alternative that kind of mean with that makes Sunset Shimmer look like a fool.
I was gonna say, Sunset Shimmer needs to get a better version of Photoshop. That's all I gathered from that scene. But no, it is interesting, and I think we're gonna talk about it more. But if you go back and watch the first Equestria Girls, I mean, number one, I'll be frank, this one was the hardest one to watch. Everything, because the way I look at Equestria Girls in a lot of ways, even from when they were first coming out, was they were all subversions of the teen girl or teen film kind of convention. The first one is about a dance, the second one's about a battle of the bands, music concert, you know, the third one's sports, fourth one camping. But the first one is it's so talky and just drowning in all of, like, there's cell phones everywhere, and it takes you 20 minutes to explain why they're taking these magical ponies and putting them in a high school teen drama comedy setting. And it was tiring for me. As we'll talk about with Rainbow Rocks and Friendship Games, it just gets right into it because they assume you've seen the first one, they don't need to explain the rules again. But in Equestria Girls, it kind of embraces all of the cliches of the teen movie that I think everyone in 2013, when they first heard of this idea, which supposedly the rumor is that Hasbro pursued Equestria Girls because they saw all of the Bronies drawing humanized ponies.
It's your fault.
It's all your fault, exactly. That's the moral of this panel here. No, but yeah, it just embraces the worst cliches of that genre that it's doing. The rest of them, I feel like it subverts it quite well. We'll talk about that. But the first one, there's cell phones everywhere, there's social media everywhere, And watching it in 2023, 10 years after I first watched it, I was just like, man, this is just like the real world. This is a big bummer. I just want to watch the Magical Pony show again. So the other ones embrace the elements of Equestria and everything a bit more. The first one's kind of a slog, for me at least. But as we were talking about, the framing of characters, if you go back and watch the first Equestria Girls, everything, and Minty will have more to say about this, but everything is in wide. There's no cinematic angles that they take at it. The cinematography is really, it was like they didn't know how to frame them yet. Like they were learning how to frame these human characters as they went along in the first movie. But you could probably talk on that more, Minty.
And for the slides for that, or after the thing about music.
Okay, you talk about it. I was jumping ahead.
I should have made the slides in the other order. I want to talk about the music first because there's a very striking difference between Equestria Girls and My Little Pony in terms of the way they handle music. So with My Little Pony, they mostly go with at that point, they mostly went with two types of music because in terms of musicals, you would have, for example, for what they use is diegetic for the songs that they sing to themselves. For example, the Ghostlies. You have Pinky singing the song to everybody else, and then they sing along. And you have the more musical approach where the characters sing as part of the story, and you have two different approaches. You have the recitative, which is the characters singing along the story as it goes to give clues to the audience as what is going on, and then they can also add their own flair. And then you have an area where the plot simply stops and the character stops to sing about how he feels about all the things that happened before. And the funny thing is that because of that, this area is recitative.
Right.
Yep. I can only assume that this recitative didn't ring as true to it doesn't sound as good to as a title. But Equestria Girls completely breaks the formula. You have non-diegetic songs where you have characters singing in background about what is going on. They are not actually singing on stage. And you have diegetic songs with the cafeteria song that is used to get the plot along, which really feels weird when you compare back to the original series. And we'll go back to that later. Right. So it's really interesting the way it actually affects the theatricality of the presentation of the story, because it's more meant as an objective way to look at the scenes, because the framing of the shots are very wide. The characters don't sing on stage because I think they would look at it and think that it would break the immersion of the story, because you feel like characters breaking into songs would not feel as real with humans, which I would agree in a certain way, but those are colorful characters anyway who talk about horses. So
I just can't get invested in the realism of this movie with blue teenagers. Just can't do it, you know. But no, it's very true, and it's. I will add this, that the only moment that I kind of perked up and was like, okay, this is clearly like this was where a lot of heart was put into, was the cafeteria song. That's the only bit I feel like a lot of people in the community still talk about, and they remix it. That's the strongest point of the first Equestria Girls, I think. It's the strongest point of Daniel Ingram's work in it too, because otherwise I am trying to recall any. I remember the song that was just "Strangers Like Me" from Tarzan. I remember that one. It was just that song. It sounded like it, but. And then there's just a lot of filler, and I'm not knocking Daniel Ingram work because he can do it better than I ever could dream to be a musician. But the cafeteria song is the only like bright spot for me for the first Equestria Girls. The rest it's shaky. It was clear that they were figuring things out at first. So that's how I feel on that, at least from a musical perspective. It's still better than anything I'll ever do. So.
If we go back to framing visually scenes, one interesting thing I did find while rewatching it that I didn't catch the first time, in the scene where at the end where you have the confrontation between Twilight and Sunset Shimmer, and Sunset threatens to break the mirror. At the moment where she gets the crown and finally starts to gain the advantage. From the at the beginning, you had Twilight on the left of the frame for most of her shots, and she was looking to the right, and then you had Sunset looking over to the left. And as that happened, they actually changed the formula to actually go to flip it, to just give it a very nice unconscious feeling that something feels wrong. The narrative actually shifted in a way,
Right.
and things are in fact going different. And I will talk about it later,
Right.
because it actually has some parallels.
So we got a good shot in there. We've been dunking on a lot of this thus far, but there are good things in the first Equestria Girls.
I think we are hitting hard on it just because we're looking back at the later movies.
Yes.
And actually, that's a part I want to really cover. The idea, if you look at the team that worked on it, it's very easy to think that Rainbow Rocks became better just because Ishii joined the team as director instead of being part of the animation direction.
Right.
But I think we shouldn't look at a list of people who work in a movie as a list of ingredients and a recipe.
Yeah, very true.
Because you still have the same writer, you still have Jason being part of the team,
Yeah.
and you look at that, you could also argue that a lot of it came from the experience that they learned from the first movie. For example, movie we'll talk about after Rainbow Rocks. Turns out Megan McCarthy came up with the dazzling concept, and going from Sunset Shimmer to the dazzling in terms of antagonists is an incredible improvement. So
Yeah, definitely, because I know a lot of people love Sunset Shimmer, and I know a lot of people here probably do if they're here for the Equestria Girls panel, but I remember a time when the fandom was not big on her post-Equestria Girls era, because the characterization is unfortunately a bit lackluster in the first movie. The comic that shows her backstory definitely helps a lot more. But then a lot of her arc gets fleshed out through the second and third and fourth movie. I feel like, and we were talking about this, and we'll probably continue talking about it during the panel, but the real MVP of Equestria Girls as a series in general is Rebecca Choisette. Does the singing for Twilight, does the voice acting for Sunset, does the singing for Sunset, and it all sounds distinctly different. And that is, I mean, that's voice acting, I know, but that's an incredibly talented voice actress. So I feel like the trilogy, at least, because we'll talk about why I kind of see Equestria Girls, Rainbow Rocks, Friendship Games as its own kind of contained trilogy. That is definitely Sunset's arc, is that trilogy. That's the key part of it. Even though they don't really focus on it in the first Equestria Girls, they only came around to it in Rainbow Rocks, and even then, it almost got cut, but we'll talk about that once we get to Rainbow Rocks.
actually, we can get to Rainbow Rocks right now.
Oh, okay.
That's the next slide.
Yeah, so do you want to start us off on points here on Rainbow Rocks? Well, number one, this is the one all you guys like, right? Yeah, okay, good. I like it. It seems like this is more or less agreed upon. This is the favorite of the series, and I went into it expecting to be skeptical, and no, it's still really great. Rainbow Rocks is, to me, it's the high point of Equestria Girls.
The movie slaps.
It does. That's a good way to put it.
So I think we can talk about the things that they improved since. One of the very weird things that they improved in the animation, because it was as you were talking about the use of wide shots and scenes, just by zooming in a little under shots, really helped to make the frames feel less empty all over the place.
Right. And not to mention, I believe I read this. I believe they reworked the character models in between Equestria Girls and Rainbow Rocks. They talk about it a little bit in the commentary track and in notes that were back when the creators talked to us on social media and Twitter. That doesn't really happen anymore, but it did. They would mention that they kind of reworked the models somewhat in between the two movies. So like I was saying before with the first Equestria Girls, you feel like watching that they're trying to get a hang of how they're going to work with these characters. By Rainbow Rocks, there's a lot more dynamic framing and lighting, and it just has more energy to it. Whereas the first Equestria Girls a lot of it, like you're saying and I was saying, are just wides, and it's just boring, and it looks static. you know?
And the most impressive part, I'm gonna go back to one slide. If you look at the release, it was about a year and 4 months after the first Equestria Girls. They learned a lot in very short amounts of time, which is incredible. Having to rework the rigs, because of course they didn't have to worry about creating back all the rigs from scratch. They didn't have to worry about recreating and redesigning the locations. They could actually just focus on improving everything that they worked on, which is a great opportunity for everybody on board. So a couple of other things that they also improved that I really enjoyed. It's very subtle, but if you look at the backgrounds that they have for all the shots, they finally introduced depth of field to simulate the way that camera would actually blur along with the distance. It's not the most physically accurate. They would sometimes have elements that are pretty far away from the camera and still have the background blur. Even though with cameras you usually have a lot of blur if you look at something very close and needed to focus on it. And it's an animated movie. You can cheat with those rules. A funny improvement that I did notice that I pointed out in the first Equestria Girls when it came out, they fixed the lockers. The locks actually make sense.
Oh yeah, I didn't even notice that rewatching it. Wait.
Let me zoom in.
Okay.
Yep, you see it.
I see.
This,
All right.
This is an actual locker.
Listen, Canada be different, all right?
Canada be different.
It's true.
Well, we have one of the things that people pointed out was the doors, that they were not safe because they opened from the inside. But then that's not safe for fire code. But at least they never made an Equestria Girls where the school catches on fire. Everything else goes wrong.
I was going to say, I loved the portion of the Equestria Girls analyst panel where we talked about fire codes. That's my favorite part of it. No, right. But yeah, it just, because of how the framing has changed between the two, there's a lot more filmmaking that happens in this one compared to the first Equestria Girls. And adding on to that, you also have different character dynamics, like you mentioned before. You add in the Dazzlings, who are really fun characters to follow with scene by scene, which does a heck of a lot better than having Sunset as the antagonist in the first one, because, again, I'm sorry, Sunset fans, she's not terribly interesting as an antagonist in the first movie. It plays into the worst cliches of its genre. In the first one, it's like, she's a bully who has magical powers at the end. All right, that's the Equestria magic playing into it. But other than that, it's not nearly as interesting as the Dazzlings, who are all really fun characters, a weird kind of Ed, Edd and Eddy dynamic to them, which is great. And they also have amazing songs. I think this is this Equestria Girls movie in particular has Daniel Ingram's best work of the series, and some of them even like his best work in the franchise, I feel like. Like, Welcome to the Show is amazing. I had no complaints with that. It's also the longest song in the franchise's history. It's like 8.5, 9 minutes long in total. So, yeah, there's a trivia fact for you.
And we were talking also about theatricality. For example, the fact that they actually had more subjective shots. Like, this didn't happen is shown. They didn't actually throw Octavia with music, which would have been interesting too, but this is a great way to show very quickly the intent of what the scene would have been like. It's great, it's very punchy, it works great. There's a change also that we had. With the songs, we got rid of all the non-diegetic songs, and all the songs that he had actually had all the characters sing about the things that were going on around, which is kind of weird because you think that the Dazzling singing about the fact that they will rule over the world, people in the crowd would probably ask a question,
Right.
And it's also pretty sweet because character-wise it means that the Rainbows actually made songs about what happened and how they got better over time. So it's almost therapy.
Right. It feels natural, whereas the first one you have montage after montage after montage. Where in this, it's kind of about like we were saying, the theatricality and the performing of it, because it's about a battle of the bands and playing music. So naturally, it will feel natural like that. And compared to the first movie, the songs are real. All of the songs are really, really good in Rainbow Rocks. So you get into it. Again, there's more energy to it. I feel like there is, just watching it, I felt so energized by it. And I'm like, clearly the people who were working on this loved working on every aspect of it. And it is, because we talked about cast and crew earlier, but it is a whole team of people coming together on this. It's a whole team of people coming together, the voice actors, the animators, the storyboard artists who have been invited to conventions over the lately, because they deserve just as much credit for it. Christina Hadley, I think, Ishi Riddell, all of them, really, all of their hard work comes through, to me, specifically in Rainbow Rocks. So it just, you feel so good coming out of Rainbow Rocks compared to after the first Equestria Girls, where I kind of just wanted to take a nap. So again, not a knock on any of their work. I'm sure they worked hard, and it's a good piece of animation, but Rainbow Rocks is Rainbow Rocks. So
All the praise, and now I'm about to talk about the nitpick. So an interesting thing about the final confrontation about the Dazzlings and Sunset Shimmer. So besides this shot, and this shot, we never actually see the sirens, their spectral form in the same frame as all the rainbows. We do not have this frame, which is really weird, because when you think back at the movie, you think that this exact shot happened. You really feel like they were that massive in the screen. You really feel that it happened, but it's mostly just your brain filling it in, which is really interesting because it feels so natural as a shot.
And the other thing, talking about framing and shots and the music, because the music's a huge part of all of Equestria Girls, but especially Rainbow Rocks. It's a lot more, the way it's edited and cut together, it's a lot, again, more exciting. There's a lot more energy to it and punchy, whereas the first one, a lot of it is montage. A lot of it is just, we're showing the characters moving, that's it. There's real, neat editing tricks in Rainbow Rocks and the way they frame and transition from things, especially in, I think, the Battle of the Bands song. They play around with the designs of the characters, and in Welcome to the Show, there's so much really good animation in Rainbow Rocks especially, where it just makes everything pop more. Whereas the first one, again, I'm thinking back to it, the only visually dynamic song I can think of is the Cafeteria song again, and even then, it's kind of just characters moving, and occasionally there's a background behind them as they're dancing. This one, there's a lot more lights and color, and there's transitions and neat editing to it, which I appreciated a lot more as someone who does a lot of video editing. So that's another thing that's exciting. I did not know that there is never a frame with them in the same frame as their spectral form, though. That's another thing that I didn't catch.
And I can perfectly understand that people didn't realize it, because the scene is so well executed that you feel like it happened.
Right.
So we can talk about the next movie.
You're the only one who watched this one, though.
I did not.
Oh, you didn't? Okay.
So
talk to me about this. Explain this to me.
So the year after Rainbow Rocks, Mattel came up with Barbie and Rock'n Royals, with Kelly Sheridan playing Barbie, and it's basically a movie where you have two characters, one going to a camp for princesses and one going to a camp for rock and roll. They get on the wrong boats and they get on each other's camp, and there's a battle of the band between both camps at the end. And that's basically what I got from the trailer alone. It's one of those movies where the trailer tells you everything happens.
It's a children's film, Minty. They have to tell the parents what to expect and show that there's nothing offensive to their children in it, so they can buy it for them for $20 on DVD.
And then write a nice little checklist of all the shots they've seen. Oh, I've seen it in the trailer.
Right, exactly. They'd have a checklist right there. No, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about, because there was kind of a rivalry in that sense, in that era between Hasbro and Mattel. If you want to discuss that a bit, because at the time, the big comparison everyone always makes is Equestria Girls and Monster High. Because Monster High was around the same time. I think it came out before Equestria Girls.
I think so.
And the general idea the general thing, that accepted narrative that people came around to is that Equestria Girls was Hasbro's answer to Monster High.
I think so.
Yeah.
It's either their answer or Hasbro was trying to find any idea of something that they could produce, and then the MLP staff gave them the idea of going with MLP with humans, and they just add nice dollar signs on their eyes, going ka-chink.
Right, but the problem is, and you mentioned it about the comparison between those two, is that Monster High has a bit more recognizable appeal because you've never seen Monster High, don't worry, I haven't either, but the general idea I get is that they're all classic, like not universal, but like monsters. You have children and parents, I guess, know Frankenstein's monster. They know vampires, Dracula. They know mummies. What the parents may not be familiar with and what the children may not be familiar with is these characters from a completely different cartoon that they may or may not have watched, and then you put them into a human Barbie form. People might not be that's not as instantly recognizable. So that might have been why Equestria Girls was not doomed from the start, but just wasn't, to me, a valid competitor to that. But I do know Equestria Girls, I mean, I didn't look up the figures, of course, but apparently Equestria Girls as like a line of toys did sell well at a certain point in the beginning. Again, I don't have the charts, that's for Hasbro's top executives to handle, but I heard that they did sell well in the beginning, but once that it supposedly petered out near the end, and that's why it went from what we're going to talk about next, which is kind of the effect we saw, if you want to go to the next, because then we got
Friendship Games,
which I am a well-known Friendship Games defender. I think Friendship Games is good, actually. I got somebody happy about that in the bag. No, Friendship Games I think is flawed. It is a flawed, because I had to follow up Rainbow Rocks, but I still think it's pretty good. It has neat ideas. I think they're just not entirely realized. I feel like they ran out of time in some cases.
And you can see it if you look at the runtime. All the three movies we've had so far, they had the TV edit of 68 minutes, and the home release of around 72 to 75 minutes, which is not a lot if you have a story where you have to pick up a new character, introduce her to everybody else, and also make her the main character of the new series. If they had maybe like 5 to 10 minutes more to flesh out everybody else, that would have been very interesting, but you're forced to write on a very specific size,
right.
And television writers are pretty used to that. So,
and speaking of television, this was one where rather than, because for more history for you out there, the first Equestria Girls and Rainbow Rocks did have limited theatrical releases, like someone raised their hands earlier. I'm surprised there weren't more, but then again, I'm old. There was limited theatrical releases for Equestria Girls and Rainbow Rocks. By the time it reached Friendship Games, the hub had already gone away. It was Discovery Family at that point, and they sent it directly to Discovery Family as a TV movie. I know you speculated that might have been because, oh yes, let's speculate.
Yeah, let's speculate.
Right, this is what it's all about. You speculated that it was because Discovery Family probably didn't have great numbers at the time, or they wanted to push their new network, so they were like, hey, what if we put this new movie on it and we push it like that? I don't think it had any effect on anything, but it definitely, there are signs that Friendship Games wasn't quite as big of an event, let's say, as Rainbow Rocks. I don't know if a theatrical release would have helped its recognition, but you definitely noted that there isn't quite as much like ambitious moments of animation in Friendship Games comparatively to Rainbow Rocks.
And I think part of it is also the release date. They went back to a year after the Rainbow Rocks, so they had 4 months less to work on it. They couldn't improve more the rigs that they had, and they probably didn't have as much time to work on the script. It's true that they had already had a teaser at the very end of Rainbow Rocks to tell you that the new movie was worked on, but they probably didn't know that much about what to expect out of it. So it's pretty common in the industry to put teasers for movies that you haven't figured out yet.
Marvel does it all the time.
They have many teasers for movies that haven't come out in 10 years, and we might never have them. So
Right. And not to mention, there's a specific thing that I always note about Friendship Games is that they actually had a different ending drawn out for it, which we talked a little bit about. If you've seen Friendship Games, I would hope I'm not spoiling it if you're all at an Equestria Girls panel and it's like a 10-year-old movie. I don't know, spoiler alert, I guess. They changed it where the original, the actual ending is where, Twilight, that world's Twilight, Sci-Twi. She stays at Canterlot High and she becomes a student there and she joins the main group. The original ending, I believe, was that she was just gonna go back to Crystal Prep, but she'd maintain a friendship with the main six, and that kind of what it would leave it at, which you said was weird, a weird way to end it. I guess I see that, but I also see that as like not pinning that world's Twilight immediately back into the cast, because I can just see a big Hasbro executive with a cigar in hand just
and a
being like,
checklist on the other one.
right, they're like, you need to put Twilight back in there. Twilight's the main character of the franchise, you need to put her back in the main cast, because if you notice in Friendship Games, they really push Sunset being the lead character of that cast of characters. But then by the time you reach Legend of Everfree and the YouTube series, Twilight is a main character again. And it seems like they wanted to go in a different direction if having Twilight as basically the antagonist at the end of Friendship Games, which I think is, again, a really neat idea. There's really neat ideas about characterization in Friendship Games. I just think, you said 5 or 10 minutes. I want like a 20 more minutes cut of Friendship Games, because there's interesting little points that it's like, oh, you could do something cool with it and have more character scenes, and they just didn't do it because they had 60, 70 minutes, and they were like, we can't do that. They cut the original ending. I think it's still available on home media releases in like Storyboard, but that tells you they were working on it. I think the only thing that was cut in Rainbow Rocks, well, it was almost cut. They almost cut that kitchen scene between Twilight and Sunset, which I was saying to you, that to me, that would have been criminal. I think the crew even talked about in commentary or in comments about it, they were like, yeah, we had to fight to keep that. And I think you needed to, because that's a great character moment between Sunset and Twilight. And if that's not there, I feel like it's not as strong of a movie. It's weird to think that a moment like that, which is just two characters talking in this musical about magical sirens and ponies fighting each other in a musical band competition. Wow, I'm talking about this at a convention on stage right now. Where did my life go wrong? But no, sometimes in film, just having a character moment like that and two characters talking from a screenplay perspective, it brings the movie out. And that particular conversation, like, you understand their characters and their anxieties, and they don't need to say how they're feeling. You get it from that point on. Even at the end, when they share a glance and a smile at each other, it's like, that's great. That's all you need. Just that glance is enough to add character to the movie. Again, there's so much more heart that's in these movies after the first movie. So that was the only portion that had almost cut. But then in Friendship Games, there's multiple sequences that were cut. There was a whole song that was cut. Part of the More That's Out There sequence, I think, was cut. The original ending they toyed with, and they removed it and put the new one in. It seemed like there was a lot of meddling with it, and there wasn't enough time to really figure it out. But that's just me. That's just me. Again, let's speculate.
So let's talk about the little improvements, changes that they had since the first
yeah.
movie. So they actually changed the colors in Sunset, and they went with something a bit less extreme, which really helps her to blend better with the rest of the characters. They also changed her outfit, but that's because toys. They changed also in terms of
Because toys. I think you could explain this entire panel and everything we're talking about with as because toys, but continue.
For the music, we actually got with an area with Twilight singing her song at the very beginning, which pauses the whole plot to actually sing about how she's feeling about everything.
Yeah.
You have some actually recitative where you have characters singing as a musical, where it's not just singing songs for concerts, really singing songs that are on a separate level on the narrative, and separate level of reality. That really feels more like the TV show. That really feels much more interesting. It actually brings back the theatricality of the movie a lot. They draw parallels where you have the confrontation between Sunset and Twilight, where Sunset is on one side of the frame on the same background and Twilight on the other side, except this time it's with Sideway. The one thing that did surprise me is that unlike the change of angle that we had in the first Equestria Girls when everything shifted, this does not happen when Twilight becomes Midnight Sparkle, which is quite interesting. I don't know if it's an oversight or they thought that they had their own reasons. It does feel more interesting because people read images from left to right. English speakers do. So when you look back at Sunset, tending your hand to Twilight, you read from left to right. She's basically throwing another olive branch, and you really feel that she really wants it. And if you did it backwards, it wouldn't feel right doing it that way.
And the other interesting thing to note in that previous slide is that just looking at those two frames from the first movie to the third movie side by side, it just instantly looks more cinematic. Like I feel like I'm watching a movie in that second shot. It just looks more interesting visually. Where the first, it's very static, but they figured it out over time, and that's neat. I appreciate that.
So let's talk about the three first movies of the trilogy because they have a couple of parallels. The first three movies are all about a competition where you have the antagonist. If you assume that Principal Cinch is the actual antagonist of Friendship Games,
right,
where the antagonist tries to use social pressure to try to push the protagonist away, or to try to push the side characters against the protagonist. Mm-hmm. So you have Sunset using school bullying to try to get Twilight out of her way. You have the Dazzlings using their singing to try to convince people to fight against each other. And you have Principal Cinch trying to pressure Twilight into using the magic she collected to become a monster, and she's pressuring her because she's the only one who's allowing her to go to that school.
Right.
Which is really interesting because you compare those three movies, it feels right as a trilogy, but you have a fourth movie, and the fourth movie is basically Scooby-Doo.
Explain.
So the first one is that you have, it's set as a camp, there's a mystery, they have to figure out who's behind it.
Okay.
But that's not the only parallel.
Okay.
So Doug Spike is not, they didn't get Doug to make the voices that they had, they actually had the library of audio sounds that they had that was done by Warner Brothers, by Frank Welker.
Wait, what?
Yeah, the voice of Scooby-Doo.
I didn't know this.
You did.
Oh.
Well, I told you what we were talking about.
Oh, you did. That's right.
Yes.
Listen. We watched through 4 Equestria Girls movies. There's a lot to take in.
That is true. But this means that thanks to Frank Welker doing the voices that were used for Doug Spike, this is technically a Scooby-Doo movie.
You know what? I'll buy it. But yeah, it definitely feels very starkly different. I don't want to say it's a black sheep of the film series of it, but you have that complete arc, it feels like, that Sunset goes through in those 3 movies. And it feels like a contained story about Canterlot High. And then once you get through that, you get to this one, and it was also a Netflix film, went straight to Netflix. We're not even getting on TV or theaters now, but it goes straight to Netflix. And as we kind of talked about, everything, all the business with, I don't know if you'll go into this in a bit, but all the business with the magical powers and the superpowers and the geodes, we kind of came to a consensus that this just feels not exactly like this, but it kind of feels like a backdoor pilot for a Netflix series, sort of. It feels like a setup to, hey, these are the things that we're gonna do in a potential series if you give it to us. And then they got a YouTube series out of it instead. So I guess it kind of worked, but it does feel different because it's trying to go in a different direction than the first 3 movies did.
And it also appears back if you look at the intros. For example, if you look at the first 3 Equestria Girls movies, you have very subjective, very high concept animated sequences that really show you the concept. You have the first one is mostly just ponies and a couple of silhouette shots that you have of the human characters, and they try to find clever ways to put just the credits. And the Rainbow Rocks one, they did such an amazing job that they said in the director's commentary that they had no notes to give. They basically just went with it. It's incredible, lots of motion graphics. It really shows how to feel, it really shows the vibe you will get out of the movie really well. It's showing a lot of character moments that tell a lot about their personality too, especially with the Dazzlings. The one for Friendship Games wasn't as impressive, but I thought it was pretty interesting too. It really felt like a proper follow-up to Rainbow Rocks. And then you have Legend of Everfree, which is mostly objective shots that they have of the bus going from left to right, of course, and nice shots of nature, and then you have the magic in a couple of shots, and mostly text where they show the people working on it, which is it's pretty standard way. You'd think like a live action movie would actually just go with it. Like I'm taking like those Disney Channel straight to DVD, straight to TV teenage movies.
Right.
It feels like it.
Right. That you open up like Camp Rock with an opening sequence like that. No. I really did notice. Like, watch back the opening sequences. They're all on YouTube, but watch back the opening sequences of all of them, but especially Rainbow Rocks and Friendship Games, because there is a lot of really great work in those. I watched those and I was like, this is almost the most impressive part of the whole thing. It gets you into it, and I love it. There's really great animation, personality to it. There was clearly hard work on those opening sequences. So you appreciate that right from the get-go. But definitely Legend of Everfree was even I noticed it was very quiet and static compared to the others. But you get a good Daniel Ingram song out of it, so...
It's pretty interesting too because it's the same director too, so it's probably not a creative vision that was different. It's just that they probably looked at the source material and they thought we can't really do something like Rainbow Rocks out of that kind of story. They'd probably prefer something more grounded,
right.
Which could be interesting too. They could have tried something that felt like a scrapbook of pictures of the previous camping trips, and then you can put cutouts of the characters and try to do interesting things out of it.
Right.
But it could also feel either samey with the previous movies because when we go look at new movies, you don't expect to just see the previous things, but slightly different. Another thing that I did appreciate in this movie that surprised me when I rewatched it because I didn't catch it the first time.
Yes.
There's a whole minute of the movie with absolutely no characters talking whatsoever. It's only actions that are happening, and the whole storytelling just works with just the animation. And it's quite interesting because I really like the idea that you trusted the animator, but I feel like the script was just this.
Just do it. Yeah, exactly. It feels Legend of Everfree. I felt very. I don't know. I don't want to say indifferent, but it definitely, there's a lot of excitement in those, especially, you know what it is? It's the fact that it's just not Rainbow Rocks or Friendship Games. They're really tough acts to follow, and it feels like the focus is more on setting up this new direction they're heading. And really, that was kind of what a lot of the crew shuffling that was going on in those 4 movies was. You started out with Jason Thiessen and Megan McCarthy, who that team ended up doing the My Little Pony movie, the 2017 movie. They started out, and then you had the Equestria Girls series crew coming in by about the 2nd or 3rd movie. And then by the time you reach the 4th one, it's more or less a new crew compared to the first Equestria Girls. So, like you were saying, maybe it wasn't a change in vision, so to speak, but you definitely feel like it went in a different. They had an idea of a different direction by the end of Legend of Everfree, and that direction was doing whatever the dance magic, movie magic, and mirror magic series was. We debated talking about that, but we weren't sure if those were movies. It felt more like...
It feels like just 3 episodes out of a pilot for a TV show. Because you have some TV shows doing 3-parters that they usually try to sell as an event that you get to watch on TV one night, which is a really effective way to get people interested in the plot if you just dump a lot of it at once.
Right.
But the way that they also, the fact that they released the 3 episodes separately, and one of them, the very first one, didn't really connect that much with the second 2.
That was because, and we talked about this, I ended up looking it up. I believe a crew member mentioned, again, when they talked to us on Twitter back in the day, that Dance Magic, the one that had the Crystal Prep characters in it, that was meant to release after Friendship Games, and I think it was in the can a pretty considerable time before the other 2 ones were, and eventually they kind of had to just loosely connect them because they never released the first one, but they did. But it was still like you feel that it's kind of stitched together like that, and then those also act as sort of a backdoor pilot for what ended up becoming the YouTube series, which was choose your own ending and little animated shorts. So
and more TV specials.
Yes, more TV specials, which we also debated talking about, and we were like, they're TV movies. Not even TV movies, they're 22-minute specials, which they're okay. Do you have any big thoughts about those ones at all? Has it been a while? It's been a while since you've seen them.
I remember Forgotten Friendship was interesting, but I felt like the way it was presented definitely didn't feel like a proper follow-up to Rainbow Rocks and the first Equestria Girls. It felt, I think, just the distance that they had between the 2, and the fact that it was the fact that there was so much time that we had to wait between the two specials. It didn't feel as right.
I will say I liked the Sunset and Trixie dynamic.
Oh yeah,
that was a blast. And then they never explore it in the other ones, which is a shame to me. But I guess it's because they didn't get the TV show. But whatever. What are you gonna do?
We got maybe 5 minutes,
okay,
maybe 7. So, questions?
Questions, anybody? You want to talk about Equestria Girls? Give us your speculation, your fan theories. I don't know. No?
Oh.
There's a question.
The non-diegetic and diegetic stuff and the domesticated and aria stuff, what would, it was all, well, not all at once, what would your wrap-up fall under?
Winter Wrap-Up would be a recitative because they sing about what the concept of the holiday is. So they really sing about what is going on and they also sing about the actions they also take. And it's not really set as a diegetic song because it's not set within the story as a song that they sing every year about it. If they had like some kind of holiday song that they would sing that was Winter Wrap-Up, that would be considered diegetic, but in this case it was really just recitative. There's one moment where it really turns more into an area where Twilight just sings about the fact she doesn't really know what to do. And it's possible. We're in a free country. There is no movie police if you break the 180 rule or if you break a convention of cinema. You might just alienate some audience members, and That happens.
and you'll make me angry.
You'll make me
give you a low rating on Letterboxd. No, which I logged all of these movies, watching them on Letterboxd. It was fun to see the reactions people had to it. I have a bunch of, like, you have Oppenheimer and everything. It's just Equestria Girls. It's an interesting visual, but now the question is, does This Day Aria count as recitative and aria?
Well, the plot doesn't really stop just to sing about the feelings. You really go back and forth between fake cadence and the real cadence.
Right.
Which I think is really interesting, the way that they did the dynamic with just Britt Mickellips singing both parts back and forth, which really had it was really punchy going back and forth between the two.
Right.
It was very, very cinematic because sometimes you'll often have musicals where you have just one character just taking over the stage, and just in this case just having two different characters with very different singing because the way that Daniel and Graham handled the tones that they had for both versions of the character was striking, and it worked great. There was great parallels with the words that he used between the two, and the animation was just you were on the edge of your seat for the whole sequence, and Disney can't even get to that level.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I may get musical terminology wrong here, but am I correct in saying that the real cadence sings in true cadence in that sequence, and the one that's chrysalis is singing in what's called false cadence?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't recall if it's the exact term, but
Probably
that's
isn't.
the gist of it.
Listen, this is film bronies. It's not music bronies. You got to go talk to Luck Rock about that one. But
It's not just it's a deceptive case.
deceptive cadence.
Oh, that's
Okay.
even more clever.
Right. Any final thoughts on Equestria Girls, Minty? Draw the saga of our life to a close.
This is definitely a very, I feel like it's a neglected series that I feel could have been great if they gave them a bit more time. And I was thinking maybe if they gave 2 years between the movies instead of one, they could have had more interesting things. I don't think it would have worked that well as a movie series because it relies a lot on people knowing about MLP to be able to watch it.
Right.
And for movie series, you usually want people to just jump in the movie seat and just expect not to need to do any homework for the franchise.
Right.
So unless they rebuilt Equestria Girls to work for people who didn't really know about the prior franchise, which is definitely possible, but it's one of the problems actually we brought up with the My Little Pony the movie, the fact that it's built for people who don't really know about the prior franchise, so
Right.
a lot of the character development kind of just sits on a shelf.
Right, exactly.
So
I guess my final note is I still love Rainbow Rocks. I still have a soft spot for friendship games, and I also love how redundant and how many colons there are in these titles. The titles for these movies are insane, like writing them out. My Little Pony, Friendship is Magic, Equestria Girls, Rainbow Rocks. That's a 4-layer dip to that title. It's a mouthful.
that will be long on the marquee.
Yep, that exactly, and that'll get you 2 minutes of runtime on there. So much so that actually, if you watch the credit sequences for every movie, they put the title twice in the opening credits. Don't know why. They always do it though. There's also a big old trademark plopped right on the title for Rainbow Rocks.
Buy our toys.
Right, exactly. I'm sure somebody who looked it over, again, the executive with the cigar watching it, and they go, you need to put a trademark there. This beautiful opening sequence you made that's gorgeously animated and everything, we need you to put a Times New Roman TM next to your title design here. And then they did. And on that note, on that corporate note, thank you so much for coming to Film Bronies, Equestria Girls. Hopefully we taught you things about movies, and we gave you some background on those movies. Go check out the Equestria Girls movies again. I think they're all worth looking back on as fans of the franchise. Watch them with the commentaries on. The commentaries are great. They've got a lot of the crew talking about it. they should be available on any copy of the movie, like online or on disc. You remember DVDs? They're still out there. Watch them on that. I don't know. Anyway, I'm Thought Penswell. Physical media, exactly. But I've been Thought Penswell. It's been great talking about these movies with my good friend.
And actually, we can just promote other panels we're having today.
Sweet plug. All right.
So I see a Star and Glimmer there.
Ooh.
We have the Glimmer Gang panel later today. Panel room 2, I think.
Yes. Panel room 2.
We got animation across the MLP fandom just after in the same panel room. So you don't even need to move seats.
Yep.
You get a 2-for-1 if you really like animation Starlight Glimmer.
Camp out, pitch a tent. You know?
And there's Ponies the Anthology tonight. I think it's 18 plus though. So
no babies at the anthology panel. And I will be running all 3 Rift Ponies panels tomorrow, which should be a blast. We'll be playing some Jackbox with the guests of honor. We'll be doing Next Top Artist. We're going to be making my friend Minty Root and other art friends draw against each other. And you'll also be on Jackbox After Dark tomorrow night. Again, 18 plus, no babies allowed. Babies are not allowed to play Jackbox. And on that note, have a great rest of day 1, everybody.